So I want to introduce you to a new project I just picked up the other day. I got this on Craigslist in the Los Angeles area for $900. This is a 1990 Honda CRX SI. It has North Dakota plates, but it's been registered in California most of its life. It looks like it spent like a year or two in North Dakota. Now from this angle, the car looks pretty decent. But as we start to get into this project a little bit more, you'll see it's got some quirks. So after picking up this car, it was insanely squirrely to drive home. It's a little hard to tell from here, but if we get down lower, you can almost see how out of alignment the rear wheels are. The left rear wheel is pointed this direction, and the right rear wheel is pointed this direction. The sunroof is also stuck in the open position. So we'll be taking this apart to find out what's wrong with that. Here's a really crazy example of how bad the tire wear is from the alignment being off. This is a level standing up straight on my garage floor, and you can see how far the tread wear has caused the tire to lean from one side to the other. When I move the level to the other side and put it as close to the tire as I can without touching, you can see there's just a few millimeter gap at the top, but then when we drop down to the bottom, there's almost 1.5 inches of space. So there's 1.5 inches lean on the tire just from the tire wear itself. Everything on the rear suspension looks relatively stock. It doesn't look modified, except I can see the replaced energy suspension rear trailing arm bushing up there. I was surprised to see that the difference between this lower control arm from the 1990 Honda CRX to the 1989 Honda CRX SI. It looks like the lower shock mounts are different, and the rear trailing arm is boxed steel instead of cast iron. I think right away we can see that the alignment is just incredibly off. That bushing's not even centered on the rod. It should be more over this direction. You can see the trailing arm is actually rubbing against the underside of the body, which is no good. And getting a look at where the alignment adjustment is, it looks like not only is that not in the right position, but possibly loose, to where this is actually allowing it to slide back and forth while driving, which would explain how squirrely this was. Again, here's a close-up angle underneath that energy suspension bushing. The alignment is just so far off, I can't even believe it. So I'm going to adjust this back to something reasonable enough to drive it up and get a proper alignment done. It looks like the wear on this bushing might be too bad already, and it looks like somebody has used an angle grinder to actually clean off the rubber from the stock bushing mount, which is leaving quite a bit of gap. So this might all need to be repaired. This is very rough. It's like sandpaper or a file almost. So I went ahead and pulled the control arm assembly just to get a better look at what's going on. Nothing really looks out of place. It looks pretty much stock all the way around for the rear suspension. The only thing that's odd is, you know, whoever decided to remove the stock bushing used an angle grinder and left a bunch of divots and pits and rubber and all kinds of crap on here. And it looks like there's no lubrication whatsoever on the inside of the Synergy suspension bushing. So the bushing looks installed correctly. Everything looks to be in place. The only thing I can really tell is that there was just no opportunity once this was installed for the bushing to slide across this surface to get the alignment correct. So luckily I have a fix for this. So I'm going to attempt to try to fix this by using a stock bushing, removing the bushing mount, using heat so that all the rubber will peel away and leave a smooth, clean surface rather than grinding it down like this. Also, when I reinstall it, I'll make sure to add some sort of lubrication to help things slide a little bit better, to get the alignment into place. And to melt this off, we get to use my favorite tool, MAP gas torch. Now you can see the difference between the two. This one is marred and gnarled. And this one is nice and smooth and clean. So I went ahead and replaced the braces for the control arm bushings and lubed them up. They seem to be in a good position. But something else I noticed when I was working on this is that the lower control arms looked very strange to me. These are kind of a boxed frame style control arm, where my 89 SI actually had cast iron lower control arms. So it was a little bit of a red flag that this 90 SI would have different control arms than my 89 SI. I threw a picture up in the CRX subreddit, and some people pointed out that these are actually control arms from an 88. So I don't know why control arms from an 88 ended up on a 90, but there's some severe suspension geometry issues with the rear, causing the alignment to not be able to be set correctly for the rear wheels. And I suspect that's because the length of these. So I'm gonna measure these, and I'm gonna try to get underneath my 89 and measure the length of the control arms, because if these control arms measure longer than the 89 ones, then that's gotta be what's off with this suspension geometry, because what's happening is the wheels are set out an extra distance, and the little arm that controls how you set the alignment angle can't reach far enough for the wheels to be straight. So if the entire assembly is set in closer to the frame of the car, then this will be able to keep everything aligned straight. Right now, it's setting out too far, meaning this can't reach far enough and has to create the wheel angle like this. So both wheels on either side of the car are sitting like this, essentially driving down the street. So I just got a package in the mail. This should be the lower control arms. I got them for, I think, $80 with shipping on eBay. I know there's aftermarket ones for cheaper, aluminum ones, but
I really just want to put the suspension geometry on this project back exactly how it was from the factory to make sure everything's aligned before I start modifying anything. So let's open this up and take a look. So these are the eBay rear lower control arms that I got. They look a little bit worn, but that's to be expected. All the bushings are just kind of rock solid back here. I think the thing I'm most surprised about is I was expecting that these would show up and be quite a bit shorter than the 88 ones that I thought were causing the problem. But when I actually lay these on top of each other, they're pretty eye to eye, the exact same length. So I'm at least going to start here. I'm going to put these back on the car, start setting things back to stock essentially, along with the shocks that I already got mounted up. These came off of my 89 SI. So these are the actual forked stock shocks that should go back on here. So I'll start putting this back together and see if things don't start lining up. Okay, so I just got back from the junkyard and I wanted to take a look at the rear trailing arm compensator arms, the toe adjustment arms on the back of this 1990 CRX SI. So this is the one that came with the vehicle, and this is, I think, what was causing all of the problems with the alignment. Because as you can see here, the one I picked up at the junkyard today, it's a very different size. So this would explain exactly why the toe angle was off so terribly bad on this car. Look at that difference. It's almost an inch and a half, almost 2 full inches. So I'm pretty confident now that once these go back on, we'll be able to adjust the toe of the car, get the alignment done correctly, and it'll be back on the road in no time. So I did go ahead and swap out the lower control arm anyways, putting this back to what it should be, stock. That's just going to make it easier going forward to do things like, purchase aftermarket shocks or coilovers or just replacement parts, because everything will actually fit what was supposed to be on the vehicle, rather than a mechanic or myself having to cross-reference any previous year models. So now you can see I put my old shocks from my 89 CRX SI on here, so that the lower forked type. Okay, so here it is with the car back on the ground now, with those new toe compensator links in place, the proper size this time. You can see the wheels are now pointing straight towards the front of the car, which is great news. So the rear end on this vehicle is now essentially back to what it would have been stock for a 1990 CRX SI, with the lower control arm, the shock mount, the shock and the shock mount type, and the proper toe compensator. So the name of this project right now is, keep it or scrap it. I'm either gonna keep the seats, take the dash, resell the sunroof, pull all the good parts off of this car and sell them on eBay and kind of part it out and then get this thing towed and scrapped. Or I'm going to fix it up and drive it. That kind of all hinges on the whether or not I can get this thing smogged, because here in California, you have to get smogged every 2 years, and especially when you're registering something from out of state. The engine and drivetrain and exhaust setup are completely stock, even with the swap for a slightly newer model Honda, so I'm not worried that it's going to pass unless there was something pretty severely wrong with the motor itself. But kind of thinking towards, and just because there was one sitting at the junkyard perfect, ready to go, replacing this rear quarter panel. If this is something I end up keeping, this panel needs to be cut out and replaced. So I did manage to acquire a pretty great condition rear quarter panel from an 89 CRX SI. This one was actually yellow from the factory, not painted yellow like that one back there. So I did, I took an electric Sawzall to the junkyard. I cut the frame. I cut around the top where the sunroof was. And I also cut inside the back channel of where the trunk was. Took me about an hour to get this piece free, just kind of figuring out where to cut. And the real way to do this type of repair is you can actually go all the way around the seam where the body panel meets the interior and drill out all of the spot welds and get a clean separation on the exterior panel. If I go around here and I look inside the wheel well, you can see, every couple of inches there's a spot weld. So I would essentially need to go and drill out every one of these. That's not something I was willing to take the time to do at the junkyard. So it was just faster to kind of slash and grab. So if I can get this thing smogged, then we'll get into much more extensive repair videos, I think, in the future for this project.